Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to the NASA Ames 2016 Seminar Series. It's an incredible honor and privilege for me to introduce our guest speaker today. Today's presentation is entitled Exploration and the Journey to Mars. It'll be given by NASA Administrator Charles Bolden. I'm going to take the opportunity here to give you a little bit of his background, since I know many of you here are students and you may not know as much as we do within the NASA workforce. But Charlie was nominated by President Barack Obama and confirmed by the U.S. Senate as the 12th Administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in 2009. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Science in 1968 and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Marine Corps. Charlie flew more than 100 combat missions in North and South Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, while stationed in Thailand between 1972 and 1973. Charlie earned a Master's of Science degree in Systems Management from the University of Southern California in 1977. And since I'm a Cal graduate, I often lose our annual bets on football to USC, so that just comes with the territory. Charlie has a 34-year career with the Marine Corps, also including 14 years as a member of the NASA Astronaut Office. After joining the office in 1980, Charlie flew 4 times on the Space Shuttle between 1986 and 1994, commanding 2 of the missions and piloting 2 others. His flights included deployment of the Hubble Space Telescope and the first joint U.S.-Russian shuttle mission, which featured a cosmonaut as a member of his crew. Charlie was inducted into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame in May 2006. After his final shuttle flight in 1994, he left NASA and returned to active duty with the Marine Corps Operating Forces as the Deputy Commandant of Midshipmen at the U.S. Naval Academy and retired with the rank of Major General. So please join me in welcoming my friend, mentor, and most importantly, my boss, Administrator Charles Bolden.
Thank you, Eugene. Thanks very much, and thanks to all of you for filling this place. The fire marshal's not real happy, but is the fire marshal still here? No, it's always good to come back out to Ames. This is a very special place with very special people. And since, as I look through the audience, I will tell most of you, since none of you were born when some of the stuff was going on about which Gene just talked, you've now had your history lesson for the week. You probably still don't know anything about Vietnam or where it is or what it is and all that stuff, but that's okay. When I was invited to join you here as a part of the director's summer colloquia series, I was asked to focus my presentation on exploration, research, technology development, inspiring future generations, catalyzing scientific progress, sharing ideas, communicating new and exciting concepts, and doing so in a way that would appeal to a diverse audience of researchers, students, scientists, engineers, and managers. And try to keep things brief. So, sounds easy enough, but I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm really interested in hearing from you all more than anything else. So I thought I would just kind of summarize some of those topics for a few minutes, and then we'll go right into a Q&A. So I do have 2 rules, and they're the rules I use everywhere I go. Rule number 1 is you can ask questions anytime. I know there's a formal question and answer period afterwards, but if you're like me and you don't trust your brain, to hold the question until the speaker finishes, just raise your hand and I will try to answer the question. If you feel like it, you can come to this mic up here, but if you want to, I think they're trying to capture all this stuff, so you may want to do that. But if you can, hold it until we get to that part, but don't feel compelled to have to hold it. Second rule is there are no dumb questions. If you're thinking about it, I can guarantee you that there's at least one other person sitting in the audience who's thinking about the same question. And all of the people thinking about that question may not be sitting in the audience, because it may be one that I've been asking myself, and I won't have an answer for you. So I'm going to get Steve Smith, who is sitting out here, and he was my colleague in the astronaut office for a while before he came back home to the Bay Area, and now is working as the associate director for ISS. Yeah. So there are enough of us in the room who can try to answer your questions if you stump me. One of the things is, as I've traveled around the country and in fact around the world, I've been telling anyone who will listen that our NASA, and I emphasize the term our, since all of you, particularly the interns, you may not identify as being a part of NASA yet, but you are. You are already. By virtue of the fact that you're here at Ames and you're working as an intern, it's your NASA. And so what I would hope that whenever this period of time is done, that you finish your internship, whenever anybody asks you what you do or what you did, you'll stick your chest out proudly and say, I work for NASA, because that's really, really, really important. You are now official emissaries and ambassadors for everything we do. And I think Eugene will tell you, and his deputy Tom, all we want you to do is tell people about the experience you had here this summer. If it was lousy, tell one of them first, and then you can tell other people. But my guess is you will find that you had a pretty good time here this summer. And you are going to have an experience that many of your peers will probably never have. And so I would implore you to share it with them, because just in talking about the things that you did this summer, you'll serve to inspire some of them to want to do the same thing. I always emphasize the word our for the very reason that I just explained to you. But I say that our NASA is as strong as it's ever been. Back in Washington, where people can tend to be pretty cynical, frequently when I say NASA is as strong as it's ever been, they say, yeah, but what about the Apollo era? And I said, yeah. Or what about the height of shuttle? And I say, yeah. And those were all phenomenal times. But I don't think the agency has been as strong as it is today for a variety of reasons. If you look at the portfolio today, NASA was established way back in 1958 when we found out that there were other countries in the world that were interested in putting things in space, specifically Sputnik. Sputnik went overhead and everybody panicked. And the president and the Congress decided that we needed to do something. And so they founded NASA with the National Space Act of 1958. And it was founded to replace an organization that was called the NACA, the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, which happened to come into being a little bit more than 100 years ago, when shortly after the Wright brothers invented the airplane, and the Wright brothers could not convince anybody in the U.S., particularly the Army Air Corps, that they should invest in this new thing called airplanes. And while the Wright brothers were failing and we weren't doing anything, the Europeans took the Wright brothers airplane and ran with it. And so aviation and aeronautics began to develop in Europe, and I mean, it bolted off. And the next thing you know, we looked up and we were way behind. And again, the president and the Congress said, wow, we need to do something to catch up. And so they established then the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics to help us get caught up. And it was through NACA, acting as an expert advisory committee, if you will, for the nation, but mainly for companies that would become aircraft manufacturers, answering critical questions that the companies just didn't have the wherewithal to answer for themselves or didn't have facilities to answer. So they would typically be asked to answer a probing question. And so they did that until NASA was established. And then what happened was, over time, we gradually began to forget about our heritage. Our heritage is aeronautics. That is the strength of NASA. Everybody gets excited about human spaceflight because that's exciting stuff. But it is not the area that leads the world or causes the nation. It's not what brings about the largest balance of trade item for this country. The largest balance of trade item is airplanes and aircraft systems and the like, and we dwarf everybody else in the world in doing that. And so NASA still is called upon to play a critical role in the development of new aeronautical systems, and thus you'll see that recently we were fortunate enough to get President Obama to support us in asking for increased funding for aeronautics so that we could work our way back to building X-planes again, experimental airplanes. And then the work that we do in science is just, I call it off the page. We have now visited every single planet in what we call the classical solar system. We have now found thousands of other planets with an instrument out of here that's called Kepler. Now we call it Kepler-2 because it died and we rebirthed it, if you will. The smart people here at Ames, along with other scientists and engineers around the agency, found a way to take a crippled instrument and make it work. And so since it's been repurposed, we've discovered thousands more planets orbiting other suns in other solar systems and other galaxies. And it now has just opened up our eyes to things that we didn't even know existed before. And all this has happened in your lifetime. You know, the reason I talk about NASA, though, and how good it is because of all of you. Some of you will choose to come back here and work with us. Some of you will go off and do other things, but you'll still have NASA in your blood. And the lessons that you learn this summer, I think, will stay with you hopefully forever. And you'll use those lessons as you go off to be productive in other places. You know, it's the employees, and I count you as employees. It's all of you here at Ames, and it's our colleagues at other NASA centers and facilities around the country and actually throughout the world, because we have NASA personnel in many nations around the world that are doing our work. For example, we've got a whole team of people, about 30 people in Moscow, day in and day out, who work in the Mission Control Center there. They're called the Houston Support Team. And they have a similar team that comes from Moscow to Houston, and they're the Moscow Support Team. And together they collaborate and run the International Space Station day in and day out. It's because of the work of our NASA employees, contractors, and partners in classrooms, boardrooms, laboratories, and even garages across the country. That's why I say NASA is better today than it's ever been before. Andrew Carnegie once said, and I quote, "Take away my people, but leave my factories, and soon grass will grow on the factory floors. But take away my factories and leave my people, and soon we'll have a new and better factory." It's you. It's not machines. It's you. And it's the stuff that you do. And what is so exciting about standing up here and looking out at all of you and all these young faces is it says our future is incredibly bright. You know, it's I just came back from Israel and Jordan and the UAE, and where we signed 2 agreements with the UAE Space Agency. It's been in existence 2 years. The average age in the UAE Space Agency is 28. Almost every single one of their leaders has at least 1 degree from an American university. And one of the agreements we signed with them is to work on an orbiter that they want to build and launch in 2020 to get to Mars in 2021 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the founding of the UAE. And that's because they want to be like us. And so they want to partner with us, and that's really important. What's the most important thing that we need to send American astronauts to Mars in the 2030s? People. Simply put, people. What's the key to making aviation greener, cleaner, safer, and quieter? It's people. How will we succeed in unlocking more and more secrets of the universe? It's our people. Our people are the keys from entry systems to wind tunnels, supercomputing to lunar science, next-gen airborne science, low-cost missions, biology, astrobiology for the young lady back there from Barcelona. It's people. Exponents, autonomy, robotics, human systems integration, and human capital. These are all driven by the creativity, imagination, innovation, curiosity, drive, and ingenuity of the women and men of Ames and of NASA as a whole. Just last week, I saw a tremendous demonstration of the work of the folk here at Ames in aeronautics. I was at Charlotte Douglas International Airport with U.S. Secretary of Transportation Anthony Fox and friends from American Airlines and the FAA. And we were there to cut the ribbon on a new lab that will host Airspace Technology Demonstration 2, or ATD-2. Anybody in here happen to work on ATD-2? It's full of interns, so there may not, there are 2 people back there. I want you to give them, representing their whole team, a round of applause, because they, now you don't have a clue, probably, what ATD-2 does. So let me try very succinctly and quickly to give you an idea of why it's important. How many of you traveled here on an airplane and sat on the ramp after they backed away and just sat there and sat there and sat there for sometimes hours before you take off? Or you land and you sit out on the tarmac waiting to get to the terminal. The tool that was developed here at Ames that's called Airspace Technology Demonstration 2 is intended to try to avoid having people sit on the ramp for hours and hours or minutes and minutes waiting to take off. And it allows us to integrate data from overhead air traffic from all around the region, from all the airplanes on the airport and everything, such that a dispatcher or whoever it is that's going to tell a pilot you're okay to start your engines and back away, it doesn't tell them to do that until there's a slot overhead that they can back out, start engines, taxi, take off, and fly up into that slot and keep going. And so that's just one of the many tools that have been developed out here at Ames. Did I get it close? I got it close? Okay. That's good enough for now? All right. Anytime you can develop a technology that makes life better for airline passengers and carriers, air cargo, business, pilots, air traffic controllers, and managers alike, all while reducing the pollution that's emitted into the environment, it's a really good day. ATD2 really has an opportunity to be a game changer in terms of reducing airport congestion by putting real-time information into the hands of all the major players in air traffic control and management. And it's being made possible by the hard work of folk here at Ames. For those of you who are working on aeronautics, it's really an exciting time to be a part of the NASA family. As you may know, President Obama is proposing a $3.7 billion investment in green aviation. Among the things it's making possible is our new Aviation Horizons initiative, and with it, the development of revolutionary new X-planes. We have 5 X-planes that we want to begin to build over the next 10 years or so. One of them is already underway. The Air Force gave it a designation, the X-57, and we call it Maxwell. And it's a funky-looking airplane. It's about the size of a Cessna, but it's got a really long, slender wing and 14 propellers on the wing, and it's an electric airplane. So it's a hybrid electric airplane that we're looking at to sort of revolutionize the way that we do air travel. It'll fly 175 knots. Now, for some of you who fly your jets around, now and then, that may not sound fast, but if you're getting into the air traffic flow and you're going where you want to go, that's pretty good speed. So, and the fact that it's no pollution, no noise, other kinds of things makes it really great. So we're excited about that. Sometimes as an organization, I think it's healthy to just take a step back and think of what all this means in terms of the impact it will have on our own families and our neighbors. So let me invite you all to close your eyes. Just bear with me. Play along, all right? Just close your eyes for a moment and imagine with me. You got to close your eyes. It's like when mom looks around and close your eyes. Okay, don't cheat over here. All right, now imagine being able to travel to most cities in the world in 6 hours or less. Imagine the aircraft you'll take there flies faster than the speed of sound, and it does so over land, which it cannot do today, with hardly a hint of a sonic boom. Imagine what it will mean to our environment if our children and grandchildren travel on planes that consume half as much fuel, that emit only about a quarter of what aircraft emit today, that make use of green energy sources. Imagine living near an airport and not being bothered by noise, because aircraft are operating some 42 decibels quieter, thus allowing noise to be contained within the airport's boundaries. Imagine what it will mean to our economy if more of our neighbors are working in good jobs, building those aircraft, and marketing them across the world. It's okay to open your eyes now. So I appreciate you all playing along. When I brag about you and your fellow NASA employees, contractors, and partners, I like to talk about the fact that you are making the impossible possible, that you are turning science fiction into science fact with the work you do every day. You're not only searching for life on other planets, you're improving the quality of life for our fellow human beings right here at home on Earth. In this sense, NASA's journey to Mars will not only send human beings to the red planet, it will also put people to work all across our country. And in fact, it already is doing so. It will and is already producing spin-off benefits that are revolutionizing the way we protect the health of both the people we love and the planet on which we live. With this in mind, let's take a break from our regularly scheduled programming and do some audience participation. We're going to play a little game, and some few of you have probably played this game with me before if you've seen me speak other places. It's called Mars Matters. So even though we here recognize why Mars matters, hopefully most of you do, it's important every now and then to remind ourselves so that we'll be more effective in reminding our friends and neighbors. So what I want you to do is I want you to repeat after me. When I point to the audience, I just want you all to yell out, Mars matters. Okay, got it? Try it one time. Mars matters. All right, you're good. Because its formulation and evolution are comparable to the Earth's, Mars matters. Because the journey to Mars is already creating and supporting jobs and economic growth here at home, Mars matters. Because it might just help unravel the age-old mystery about whether life exists beyond Earth. Mars matters. Great job, great job. You're all hired. I take you along with me when I go speak places. Frankly, had you told me that we'd be this far along on this journey to Mars when I first became the NASA administrator 7 years ago, I would have been flabbergasted. You may recall, you all won't, this is for Jack Boyd and you, but most of you won't, Eugene and Tom, some of you will recall, but they will recall that it was not too long ago when there was not even a real consensus around Mars as a destination. Sure, many of us in this room, and I do include the students there, many of us in this room had long dreamed of sending humans to Mars. But as an aerospace community, Mars was really just a broad horizon goal. There was no realistic or sustainable plan in place for getting there. There was no timetable. Today, there's a new consensus forming around NASA's plan, timetable, and strategy for getting human beings to Mars in the 2030s. Our plan is available online at www.nasa.gov/journey-to-Mars for anyone and everyone to read. It's clear, it's affordable, it's sustainable, and it's attainable. And it's dependent on the hard work of Team Ames. Today, we're closer to sending human beings to Mars than ever before, for anyone, anywhere, at any time. I'll tell you this, one of the great indicators of progress is that I see is that when it comes to the journey to Mars, it's quite frankly that people don't smirk or they don't laugh or look at me strange like I'm from Mars when I tell them that we're headed to the red planet. Less often are folk asking, why aren't you doing this? Or why aren't you doing things my way? Or is Mars the right destination? Rather, they're asking, and this is around the world, they're asking, how can we be a part of this? And what are some areas in which we can work together? So as we open the floor for discussion, I want to just ask you once more to imagine. Imagine a future where human beings are living and working together on Mars and kids just view this as a fact of life, much like the International Space Station today. Anybody in here 15 years or younger, 16 or younger? There's one over there, one here. They are the they're part of the Mars generation. President Obama calls you all the Mars, you're part of the space generation, and President Obama calls you a part of the Mars generation. And the reason I say that is because there has not been 1 second of your life or 1 second of your life. You have not breathed one breath when human beings have not been living and working off this planet on the International Space Station. In your lifetime, you're how old? 16. 16. And we're still going strong. And you think about it, I mean, Steve Smith and I were talking about it earlier this morning. I'm a big fan of recommending the International Space Station for the Nobel Peace Prize because the principal partners are Russia and the U.S. We can't even talk to each other down here. I mean, we have a hard time, with the Secretary of State and the foreign minister sitting in the same room. And yet we work collaboratively on the International Space Station day in and day out. Scott Kelly and Mikhail Kornienko just came back from a year in space as partners. We've got, an American astronaut getting ready to launch. Kate Rubin is getting ready to launch with her Russian counterpart and a Japanese astronaut in a week. It's just incredible what we do 250 miles above Earth. So it's really, really, really important. But imagine a world where NASA and our international partners are using Mars as a stepping stone to the rest of the solar system. Imagine a world where a robust private space industry is launching human beings, cargo, and satellites of all sizes to space at a significantly lower price point. A world where more Americans are working in good jobs as a result of this, and all our efforts on commercial crew and cargo and the goal of building a robust commercial market in low Earth orbit have been attained. Imagine a future where our grandchildren's children are drinking cleaner water, breathing cleaner air, and making use of cleaner energy thanks to NASA technology. Imagine a world in which girls and young people of color are more excited about pursuing education in science, technology, engineering, math, and the arts. And I'll kind of stray here for a second. I just came back 2 weeks ago from a back-breaking trip through 4 nations. We started out in Israel, we went to Jordan, then we went to UAE, and then we came back to Paris, France. And I had lived in the Middle East region back when I was still an active duty Marine from 1997 to 1998. And when I went back this time, I was just blown away by the cultural changes that have taken place. In STEM-related courses in colleges and universities across the region, in Jordan and UAE, more than half the students were women. And of the graduates and people taking jobs in the region, more than half of them were women. We met with King Abdullah of Jordan, and his science advisor is a young woman who happens to be an engineer and scientist. When we went to the UAE, they have a member of their House of Representatives, if you will. The Speaker of the House is a woman, elected by popular vote, and then further elected to be the Speaker of the House by the vote of her peers in that House. So in many ways, I mean, they've got a lot of work to do. There's no mistaking that. But in many ways, there are examples of things that we only wish we could do. You know, at NASA, we pride ourselves in being a very diverse workplace. I'd give my eye teeth to have 50% of my engineers be female. We're a long way from doing that. And it's not because we're not trying. So I think there are important lessons to be learned everywhere. Ames plays a critical role in played a role in helping to promote that, because we've had international interns for years now who have been coming here to the Ames Research Center in the summertime just to get a look at how we do things at NASA. And we met with 8 former international interns and 2 incoming students while we were in Jordan with King Abdullah, who all had worked here at the Ames Research Center, and they gave glowing commentary about what an experience it was for them to work here alongside U.S. scientists and engineers, where they had a feeling that they were trusted, that they were given open access to everything that was going on, and they had an opportunity to really learn. So, think about what's going on. Just imagine the way the world can be. Imagine a future in which maybe, just maybe, humanity finds the answer to the age-old question, a question that the ancient Greek philosopher, engineer, astronomer, Thales of Miletus might have thought to himself as he stared up at the night sky, of whether we're alone in the universe. When I imagine this future, I can't help but think of all of you, the people who are making that future possible, who, as I said a moment ago, are making the impossible possible by turning science fiction into science fact. We're now embarked on an absolutely incredible journey, unlike any that humanity has ever undertaken in our lifetime. It's a journey that many of our international partners are clamoring to join, and much of the credit for where we are today goes to each and every one of you who works here at Ames or who is now here as an intern. I want to thank all of you for what you're doing to make our NASA as strong as we have ever been. For the interns, thanks so much for picking us to spend with whom you are spending your summer. And hopefully you'll find us so attractive that you'll want to come back and spend more time. So with that, I think I'll move over here and we'll try to answer some of your questions if I can. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. So if you have a question, please line up in back of the mic and ask one question only. Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator Bolden. When did you know that you wanted to go to space?
Oh, late in life. Would you do me a favor? When you come up, would you just give me your name and where you go to school, if you're an intern or something like that? And so if you can give us your name and your school, then I apologize.
My name is Jenny. I go to Stanford.
Whoa. Jenny at Stanford. Great. I am one who never dreamed of going to space. I never dreamed of growing up. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, so there are a lot of reasons why I never had that dream. I grew up in the segregated South, and so for me, becoming an astronaut or going to fly an airplane or something else, that was just inconceivable. You know, my mom and dad were teachers, and they had told me and my brother all our lives that we could do anything we wanted to do as long as we were willing to study really hard and work hard. And I believe that to a certain extent. But the thought of being an astronaut, that didn't compute. What happened was the place that I did want to go was the United States Naval Academy. And I ended up, after a lot of difficulty and struggle, I ended up getting an appointment to the Naval Academy. And I went there and graduated in 1968. But my first year there, I met a young man who was a major in the United States Marine Corps. So here I was being influenced by a guy in the Marine Corps. And the only two things I knew when I left C.A. Johnson High School in Columbia, South Carolina was never, ever would I be a Marine. They were absolutely crazy. And under no circumstances would I fly airplanes, because that was inherently dangerous. So those were the only two things I knew coming out of high school. And my first company officer was Major John Riley Love, a person who continued to influence me until the day of his death several years ago. But when it's time to graduate, I look back and I said, I want to be like him. I want to be a Marine, and I want to be an infantry Marine. That's really stupid. But I was so impressed that I said, I want to be like him. And some of you interns, when it's time for you to make up your mind 4 years from now or 2 years from now or 3 years from now, you're going to look back on your experience here and you're going to say, boy, I sure would like to be like Tom. Or I'd like to be like Dr. Tu, or I'd like to be like Jack Boyd, or somebody that you have worked with here and has really impressed you. And similarly, young people with whom you work today, whether you're a camp counselor or a scout, leader, or it doesn't make any difference. Somebody's going to look at you and say, I want to be like him. So you're a role model, whether you like it or not. So keep that in the back of your mind also as you're thinking about what you want to do. So I became a Marine, and I married my wonderful wife. She did not like the idea that I'd become a Marine, and she did not like the idea at all that I wanted to be an infantry officer and go to Vietnam and try to defy the law of averages on the life expectancy of a second lieutenant infantry officer. And she kept saying, why don't we go to Pensacola? And I said, but that's flight school. She said, I know, but we need to go to Pensacola. And during my time training as a second lieutenant, I found I did not like crawling around in the mud. And she said, that's why I said we ought to go to Pensacola. So I said, okay. As I learned over the course of my 48 years of marriage, when my wife says we ought to, I now generally say, yes, dear, because she is probably right. And so we struck it off for Pensacola. First time I got in an airplane and lifted off, I could not believe it. I mean, I just fell in love with it right away, first flight. And then things happened, one thing after another. I had an instructor pilot who was a test pilot, and he talked about how difficult it was, how challenging it was, not about no scarf hanging out of the cockpit or any of that stuff, but how demanding it was. And that really intrigued me. And so I said, one of these days I think I'd like to be a test pilot. And so I started trying. As soon as I got my wings, I started applying to be a test pilot. It took me about 6 or 7 years of applying, and I finally got accepted to the Navy's test pilot school. And while I was serving as a test pilot in a place called Patuxent River, Maryland, NASA had selected the first group of space shuttle astronauts. And among that group was, they had three African Americans were selected: Ron McNair, Guy Bluford, and Fred Gregory, the first people of color ever in the space program. And one of them, Ron McNair, had grown up just like I had. He grew up 42 miles from me in a little bitty town named Lake City, South Carolina. He was a little bit younger than I was, but unlike me, Ron had determined he was going to be an astronaut. From the moment, he doesn't ever remember not wanting to be an astronaut. And we sat and talked for a weekend. When he got ready to go back to Houston, he said, "Are you going to apply for the program?" I said, "Not on your life." And he said, "Okay, I don't get it. Why are you not going to apply?" He said, I said, "They never picked me." And he looked at me and he said, "You know, that is the dumbest thing I ever heard. How do you know if you don't apply?" And he made me feel about that big, because I had forgotten what my mom and dad taught me growing up. And Ron left, and I got my pen and paper, and I applied. I was 33 years old. I was about to be a major in the Marine Corps, and I decided I'd do something that I said I would never do. I decided I'd apply for the space program. And sure enough, I got nominated by the Marine Corps, got selected by NASA to come interview. And I remember going from Patuxent River to Houston, and I told my wife, I don't stand a snowball's chance in hell of being selected, but I just want to go down there and meet astronauts. And I said, I'm going to have a good time when I go down. And I did. Steve will tell you, you can either go down there and decide to enjoy yourself and take advantage of the opportunity, or you can go down and get all uptight and probably just mess yourself up. I decided I was going to have a good time, and I did. And I ended up being selected in the second group of space shuttle astronauts. So very long answer to your very short question, but the lesson hopefully for you all is, if there's something you want to do, ask for it. You know, don't let anybody tell you that you can't do anything. But particularly, don't let yourself limit yourself. 3 things I tell students all the time. Study really hard. You all know that. Work really hard. I mean, focus on whatever it is you're doing in the class. And the most important thing is, don't ever be afraid of failure. You know, I put the limitation on myself. I was afraid that I would not be selected. I just didn't want to be embarrassed by applying for the program and not being selected. Don't do that. Particularly women. Whatever you want to do, go do it. When you get into a job, or you in a class, you're in an office, and people are trying to inquire as to why are you there, don't waste your time trying to explain your presence. Just do your job and do it well. And if they don't understand, pretty soon you'll be their boss. And then you can get rid of them or help them understand. I don't know. Question?
Thank you for your talk. It's always very inspiring to hear you. My name is Anne-Sophie. I work in the space bioscience branch. So, you know, men were the first on the moon. So you think it's time and the turn for women to maybe be the first on Mars?
On Mars? What's wrong with that? And seriously, you know, we selected, out of 6,800 applicants, the class of 2013 of NASA astronauts, we had a first ever in anything I've ever been associated with. We selected 8 people in the class of 2013 out of 6,800 applicants, and the top 8 were 50% men and 50% women. And I'll tell you, every single one of those 8 is just, they blow your socks off. They're absolutely incredible. And I am hoping that out of the 18,000 applicants that we got for the class of 2017, we will be so fortunate. But I think one of the reasons I told you the story about traveling through the Middle East is that we cannot afford, this nation cannot afford to shirk half of its population. We just won't, we won't survive. We won't win if we choose to do that. So I don't see anything wrong with it. Besides, I have 3 granddaughters, and I've already promised them one of them is going to be on the first crew to Mars. So I'm in trouble if they don't make it. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Roberto Carlino. I work for TEST, the Law on Mission on Kepler, and I'm also one of the organizers of the Early Career Network here at Ames. So one question that arose some time ago, it was considering all the people retiring at Ames, at NASA in general, how we going to pass down all the knowledge and experience to the early careers?
Great question. Not enough people are retiring fast enough, to be quite honest. Now let me explain that, okay? Because of the way that budgets operate, you know, we're really, Eugene has a lot of you he would like to hire, but his ability to hire is very limited because, you know, he's got a ceiling that he can't exceed. And so the other thing I mentioned, the fact that while you need an experienced workforce, but you also need fresh blood that's coming in to replace that experienced workforce. The reason we need the experienced workforce is because they are the wisdom that passes down to some of you sitting around here. Let me tell you, I can imagine, any of you ever sit down and talk to Jack Boyd while you've been here? Everybody know who Jack Boyd is? You sit and talk to him for 5 minutes, and you're drooling. You're just, I mean, the richness of the experiences that he has had in his time in this agency. You could talk to Tom or Eugene. They're not young chickens, and they've had a lot of experiences. I know they look like they're new, but that's the way that we do exactly what you're talking about, that we pass down the wealth of knowledge that we have. One of the things that we're trying to do is trying to do what we call knowledge capture. Usually when we have an accident in NASA, it's because we forgot something. We forgot a lesson we learned years ago. And so we repeat it. I tell students a lot of time, they ask me, what do I need to study to be an astronaut? Math and science, that's a no-brainer. You know you got to do that. Language skills, being able to read, write, communicate so that you can let people know that you're competent and you want to do something. The other thing is history, because if we do not study history, we are destined to repeat it. Nowhere is that as important as in the work that we do in space and aeronautics research and exploration. If we don't know our history, if we don't remember when we had a bad day, we will repeat that bad day. And, we don't have accidents very often, thank goodness. But boy, when we do, we look back and we go, man, how did we forget that? We almost never have a brand new type of accident. We just forgot something. And that's the value of having the turnover, the experience, the wise persons talking to the young people and passing it on. They can't pass on any more to you, though, than you're willing to ask for. So that's where the onus is on you. Eugene can teach you all kinds of stuff if you're willing to listen. But you've got to go up and say, hey, Dr. Tu, when did you come to NASA? How did you happen to decide that you wanted to do what you do instead of going off and being a planetary scientist or something? You've got to ask. So that's on you while you're here. That's one of the reasons that you come here, that we bring you here for an internship, is to give you an opportunity to be around people that we think are some of the brightest and best in the world, not in the country, in the world, and have an opportunity to rub shoulders with them and ask them questions and make sure that you're smarter than we were. So that's important. Question there.
My name is Matthew. I'm from the University of Utah, and I'm in the aeromechanics branch. I guess you sort of already answered this, but what do you look for in astronaut candidates? And what can I do to make my resume a little better? And I'm, considering joining the military and stuff, and for other reasons. But
Steve actually probably has a lot better idea than I do because he left the office much later than I did. You want to try it? What are we looking for today?
Yeah, I've had several people ask me this summer already the same question. And what I usually tell them is to pursue something you love. If it happens to help you in your journey to become an astronaut, that's great. But there's a lot of obstacles to becoming an astronaut, so you really want to enjoy what you're pursuing. So that's kind of the number one rule. Be diverse, do different things, try different things. Don't be afraid to fail, as General Bolden said. But the most important thing is to enjoy what you're doing. So if you have multiple choices among what you want to pursue, you're tempted to choose the one you think that improves your chances the best. Don't take that one. Take the one that you really love. So,
kind of echoing what Steve said, I am frequently accused of being too passionate. I cry a lot. But I have loved life. I don't have what's considered to be a conventional career for a Marine. And it's just because I did things that I wanted to do and I thought I would enjoy. And people would frequently, at every step, they'd say, if you do that, then that's it. Your career is done. I said, that's okay. This is what I want to do and so I would say, like Steve did, follow your passion. That's the number one thing. If you don't get it, you've had fun. So.
Hi, my name's Jason. I go to school at UC Irvine. You talked a little bit about Mars during your talk, but you didn't mention SpaceX at all. And SpaceX wants to be on Mars about a decade earlier than NASA. I was wondering, what do you see NASA's role working with SpaceX, and if they beat us to it?
Yeah, what we're doing right now is we're a partner with SpaceX. You know, we recently signed an agreement with them to work on something called Red Dragon. And we think Red Dragon is critically important because while it's not a human mission, it'll be the first mission that uses supersonic retropropulsion to get on the surface of Mars. There are two giant challenges right now to putting humans on Mars. One is just understanding better radiation and its impact, long-term impact on the body. We think we're okay, but we need to know more. The second big challenge is what we call intra-descent landing. How do you get 20 metric tons on the surface of Mars? Curiosity weighed a ton. And we really sweat Curiosity's entry and landing. But you're talking about 10 times that much, 20 metric tons or more to sustain a human. So we're looking at everything. We're looking at parachutes, balloons, just plain old barn, you name it, and we're doing it. But we are not doing any work on supersonic retropropulsion. SpaceX is, and so we've supported them on every one of their attempts to return their first stage vehicle. Not because I think it's important about reusability. I'm not, the court's still out on whether or not reusable systems are any cheaper. But boy, the data that we're getting when they come back and go through this period of from supersonic down to stop, that's valuable data. I don't look at it being a contest. If they can get humans on, you got to remember what Elon said. He's not coming back. That is not our plan. So we may take 10 years longer if he's able to get there when he says, but ours is going to be a round trip. So I just promise people that. And I think that's not trivial. You know, if you're willing to go and not come back, maybe you want to run that risk. We just think it's going to take us a little bit longer to make sure that we've got, robust systems that we think we need. And that's not just the spacecraft itself, but it's the systems that give us clean drinking water, bathrooms at work, all those kinds of things that we have stuff that breaks on the International Space Station. It's 8 months one way to Mars. So you've got to have much more robust systems than we have today. And I'm not sure everybody's thinking about that part. Yeah.
Okay, I am Miguel. I'm from Mexico City. I came here as an international student on behalf of my school, the Metropolitan Autonomous University, and the Mexican Space Agency. We, at our project here at Ames, we're actually working with these two Jordan students that you talked about a bit earlier. And I just wanted to ask if there's some possibility of, making their paperwork easier to get their visa here. So we're really eager to have them on our team. They've been doing great work. I think they even showed you the things that they were doing.
So I don't want to bore everybody, but essentially what he's talking about is, most people have to have a visa when they come here. And we have two organizations that work to enable the International Intern Program. It took years to get clearance to conduct the International Intern Program because post 9/11, it's just hard to get international people, any foreign national aboard a NASA installation. And so we've got all kinds of things we have to do. Eugene is working with our folk back at NASA headquarters. We've actually got the Office of International Relations, the Office of International Interagency Relations, and then the Education Office. And so the two of them put together the International Intern Program, and we're looking at a more effective way to handle the paperwork part, the visas, so that when they get here, the Office of Education can just, boom, work with Ames or Johnson or whatever center they happen to be on and get them right to work. So that, we hadn't thought about it. We're working on it. Thanks for the question. Anybody else? I think we've got time for one before I have to leave. One more question. They're worried because I got a plane to carry.
I'm J.R. Skoke, a contractor from the SETI Institute, and you talked about your plan, a decade-long plan for a trip to Mars, and we've heard long-term plans from NASA before, and you can make them as administration. How can we brace against changes in government administrations and Congresses to be able to keep some of those plans going forward in the multi-decade time span?
I would say there are a couple of things we have done and are doing. I think we have a viable. Remember I told you before, when I became the NASA, or before I became the NASA administrator, in my confirmation hearing, I made a promise to the Congress, same promise I had made to the President. I would never bring in a proposal to them that wasn't reasonable, something that we didn't think we could really achieve, that it wasn't sustainable, it could last over multiple administrations and multiple Congresses, and that it was affordable. The affordable part is what kills stuff a lot of times. So we recognize, about where our budgets are going to be. We made a decision several years ago that we'd build a strategic plan and then price it, tell people what it was going to take to do that. So the budgets that we are getting here of late will sustain us and will allow us to afford sending humans to Mars in the 2030s. So that takes care of those three things. The other thing we've got to do, the onus is on us, is to constantly tell people in Congress, in the White House, in OMB, and everywhere, what it is we're doing. And we've got to give them little progress markings all along the way. We did the last test firing of a 5-segment solid rocket booster at Utah this morning. It went, I think, flawlessly as far as what I've heard. We flew Orion on its first test flight back in December of 2014. We're going to fly SLS and Orion together in 2018. So, unlike programs that were designed to carry people to distant places in the past, we're a good little bit farther along. We really kind of pared down the program. We decided we would use, where we had to, we'd use existing technology. And as new technologies come along, we'll fold them into the program. So it's an evolvable Mars program. Some of the stuff that we will fly to Mars, if you're a first crew member, that hasn't even been invented yet. So that's kind of the way we're doing it. And you all have been great, and I apologize for having to run, but if you're an intern, really just kind of suck it up this summer. Take advantage, ask for the world. All they can do is tell you no. But if there's something you want to see here, say, I heard that you all have, and I'd like to see it. And if we got it, you'll probably see it. And the other thing is just set your goals really high and try not to give up on them. And you'll get there eventually. But thanks so much, and good luck to all of you. Thank you.